Let's be completely honest for a second here. Staring down that ACCA business and technology syllabus. Um, it can feel like trying to untangle a massive ball of regulatory spaghetti.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
Especially while the clock is just, ticking down to exam day.
Right. You are looking at these endless lists of organizational structures and compliance frameworks.
And those notoriously tricky multiple choice questions.
Ugh, yes. The ones that seem specifically designed to make you second guess literally everything you just read.
They really do.
The dread of trying to memorize how every single corporate entity operates is, frankly, a very real pain point for so many of you studying right now. But what if understanding just one fundamental, almost counterintuitive truth about how charities operate is the secret?
Oh, it is. It's the exact key to cutting through all that confusion.
Exactly. It helps you instantly spot the traps the examiners have laid out for you.
It absolutely shifts your entire perspective. Because once you see the underlying mechanical logic of these organizations, well, the exam questions stop looking like booby traps. They start looking like highly predictable, logical patterns.
Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. We are so thrilled to have you with us. Today, we are targeting the ACCA paper BT, that is Business and Technology, and we're jumping straight into the mechanics of not-for-profit organizations.
Specifically focusing on part 2, which is charities.
Yes. And we have a very clear mission for this session. By the time we wrap up today, you will have a crystal clear understanding of the internal structures of charities.
Along with the unique operational risks they face globally.
And exactly how examiners use those risks to test your technical knowledge. We know you are putting in the hours. This deep dive is custom tailored for you.
Whether you are listening on a crowded commute in London, taking a quick lunch break in Dubai, or, doing late-night exam prep in Kuala Lumpur.
We are right there with you. So let's just unpack this. What exactly is a charity, like in the strict context of this syllabus? Let's strip away all the academic jargon.
Okay, I can define it for you in exactly 2 sentences.
Okay, let's hear it.
It is a type of not-for-profit organization existing entirely for philanthropic purposes to benefit defined groups in society.
Right.
And to be financially viable, it relies heavily on public or business donations, favorable tax treatments, and unpaid volunteers. That's it.
So if we need an everyday analogy here, think of a charity exactly like a traditional commercial business. But instead of paying out financial dividends in cash to private shareholders, the dividends are paid out in societal good.
To a specific targeted community.
Exactly. Is the actual real-world impact.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. But here's the surprising fact that almost always catches people off guard in the exam hall.
Oh, what is it?
Charities are actually allowed to run highly profitable commercial businesses.
Wait, really?
Yes. We are talking about massive retail shop chains generating millions in revenue.
Wow.
Provided that the commercial company formed to operate those shops formally covenants its entire annual profits back to the parent charity.
Hold on, I need to stop you there. A charity running a highly profitable commercial enterprise.
Yep.
I think that surprising overlap between commercial activity and charitable purpose leads us directly into exploring why examiners absolutely love this topic. It feels like a contradiction,
It does. And examiners consistently test this area because charities operate in what I like to call a mirror universe to regular commercial businesses.
A mirror universe. I like that.
Yeah, because in a standard corporate scenario on your exam, you evaluate success by looking at profit margins, market share, and shareholder wealth maximization.
Right, the usual suspects.
But in the charity universe, those metrics simply do not apply. Instead, charities are judged by the 3 E's.
Okay.
That is effectiveness, economy, and efficiency.
The 3 E's. Okay, let's make sure we actually understand how this plays out in practice rather than just, listing what they are.
Sure.
Let's say a medical charity is trying to provide vaccines. How do the 3 E's work in a real-world scenario?
Great question. So let's look at the mechanics of it. Economy is about acquiring resources at the lowest possible cost.
Okay, so getting cheap medical supplies.
Right, or utilizing volunteer nurses. Then effectiveness is about whether they are actually achieving their philanthropic goals.
Like, are the vaccines actually reaching the target population?
Exactly. And finally, efficiency is the ratio between the two. So maximizing the output of vaccines for a given input of funding.
But those can be in direct conflict, right?
Both all the time.
For example, if a charity spends a massive amount of money to fly a specialized doctor into a remote area via helicopter, From an economy standpoint, that looks
It's
terrible.
incredibly expensive.
Right. But from an effectiveness standpoint, they are saving lives that would otherwise be lost.
Exactly. And that tension right there is what you have to analyze.
Ah, I see.
Because in a traditional business, spending premium cash on helicopter transport with zero financial return would get a CEO fired.
For destroying shareholder value, yeah.
But for a charity, if it maximizes the effectiveness of their core mission, it might actually be the correct strategic decision.
Wow.
Examiners want to see if you, as a future finance professional, can shift your mindset to evaluate that unique metric. Because charities face massive, real-world corporate risks.
They aren't just local bake sales.
Exactly. These are complex entities dealing with global economics.
I have to push back a little here, though. If they aren't chasing a bottom-line profit, how do examiners actually try to trip students up? Where is the trap?
The trap is in how they frame the scenario. So examiners present a complex business situation and ask you to identify the specific external restriction or risk factor the charity is facing.
Okay.
A risk that might be minor for a commercial tech company could be instantly fatal to a charity.
Right, so they want you to identify things like regulatory limits.
Or shifts in public funding, operational bottlenecks, rather than standard commercial risks like losing market share to a competitor.
Yeah. So it's about identifying the unique constraints of this mirror universe. That makes total sense. Let's break this down into 3 manageable pieces so you, the listener, can easily categorize the mechanics in your head for the exam.
Good idea. We'll take it one part at a time.
Let's start with part 1, the rulebook.
Right. Because charities exist for philanthropic purposes, like the relief of poverty, the advancement of education, or environmental protection, they get highly favorable tax treatments.
Right.
But tax authorities don't just hand out exemptions out of the goodness of their hearts.
Shocking, I know.
Yeah. In exchange for those benefits, charities are strictly limited by state regulators. In the UK, for example, that is the Charity Commission, which is governed by the Charities Act 2006.
So their constitution fundamentally dictates not just what they can do, but very strictly what they cannot do.
Exactly.
Because if an organization steps outside those defined charitable activities, they risk losing their tax benefits.
Which would collapse their funding model entirely.
Yeah.
It's a very rigid compliance environment.
So, simply put, tax benefits come with strict rulebooks.
Yes.
But think about the practical reality of that. If the operational rules are so intensely strict and limiting, how do they manage massive global assets without crossing a regulatory tripwire?
And that brings us to part 2, the structure and the assets. The corporate form of a charity varies wildly depending on its size.
Like a small local charity might just be an unincorporated association.
Right. But for large charities, we're talking about high-value assets. Real estate, office buildings in capital cities, international logistics hubs.
Big stuff.
Yeah. To protect these, the ownership of high-value non-current assets is usually vested in independent guardian trustees.
Wait, why not just let the charity's board of directors or management team manage the real estate? Why do they need independent guardians holding the deeds?
To create a legal firewall. The operational side of a charity deals with massive daily risks, everything from employment liabilities to potential lawsuits for negligence out in the field.
Oh, I see.
If the charity gets sued, you do not want the physical real estate, the hospitals, the headquarters, the shelters, to be seized in a settlement.
That would be disastrous.
Completely. So, by vesting high-value assets in guardian trustees, those assets are shielded. The trustees then lease the property back to the operational charity, strictly under provisions that satisfy those regulatory requirements.
That is fascinating. It's a deliberate structural separation to protect the long-term mission from short-term operational disaster.
Exactly. The guardian trustees ensure the massive assets are deployed safely.
Simply put, structure matches scale, and big assets need independent guardians.
Well said.
But that structural firewall only protects the physical assets. What happens when the world changes and a charity's core mission is suddenly rendered completely obsolete overnight?
Now we are on to part 3, management and evolution. This is the real test of a charity. They are typically governed by a council, made up entirely of volunteers.
Okay.
You can think of them as broadly equivalent to non-executive directors in a limited company. It's their job to chart the long-term strategy and adapt to the external environment. And a perfect historical case study for the exam here is Barnardo's.
Let's look at the mechanics of the Barnardo's example. They were originally founded as Dr. Barnardo's Homes, right?
Yes. And their core mission was highly specific: providing residential orphanages for children without family support.
But the sources note a massive shift happened after World War II.
Right, you have to look at the macroeconomic and political shifts.
Huh.
Post-WWII, the government developed comprehensive welfare services.
Okay.
Concurrently, there was a massive societal increase in families willing to adopt and foster children.
Oh, I see. So suddenly the government is essentially stepping in to do their job for them.
Exactly.
Meaning their entire orphanage model, their core product, if this were a business, is completely obsolete almost overnight.
Precisely. The demand for traditional residential orphanages plummeted. If Barnardo's had stubbornly stuck to their original operational model, running large buildings, they would have gone bankrupt or lost all their public support.
So what did they do?
The charity had to fundamentally change the way it maximized the welfare of children. They evolved from providing physical residential homes to providing broader support services.
Like counseling and foster care support.
Exactly.
And the financial pivot there is huge, too. I mean, they had to convince their legacy donor base to keep funding intangible social work instead of the tangible physical buildings they were used to sponsoring.
Yeah, that's not easy.
Yeah.
The underlying philanthropic purpose remained helping vulnerable children, but the operational execution evolved completely to match society's new reality.
Simply put, to survive, charities must constantly evolve with society.
Or their funding dries up.
Exactly. Let's take all of this theory, all these structural framework, and throw them into a global, real-world example.
Yeah.
Because that is exactly what you are going to face on exam day.
You aren't going to be tested on just the definitions.
No, you are going to be given a complex scenario. So let's walk through the evolution of Oxfam.
Oxfam is a brilliant example of how a localized, highly specific mission scales into a massive, risk-facing global enterprise.
Let's trace the mechanics of their growth. It starts in 1942. They were originally formed as the Oxford Committee for Famine Relief.
Right.
And their initial purpose was hyper-specific, relieving famine in Greece that was caused by an Allied blockade during the Second World War.
Just think about the logistics of that for a second. A local committee in the UK trying to manage food relief in a war-torn Mediterranean country.
Unbelievable.
But their underlying purpose, famine relief, was scalable. Fast forward to today, and Oxfam provides famine and poverty relief on a worldwide basis.
But structurally, they aren't just one big office in Oxford anymore.
No, not at all.
The sources note that Oxfam is a federal international organization comprising 13 different bodies operating across all continents.
Yes.
And unsurprisingly, most of those constituent organizations operate as limited companies.
This is where we get into the intense real-world risks they face, which is prime territory for your exam.
Yeah.
International aid charities are highly vulnerable.
How so?
When Oxfam operates globally, they aren't just dealing with poverty.
Yeah.
They're dealing with sovereign nations. That introduces massive country risk.
Right.
They have to navigate 13 different legal jurisdictions, comply with multiple local tax codes, deal with political instability, and sometimes, operate in active conflict zones.
And let's elevate the finance angle here, because this is an ACCA paper. Because they are constantly moving money across borders to fund these operations, they are deeply exposed to unhedged FX exposure.
Currency risk.
Exactly. If you are a multinational commercial corporation like Apple or Toyota, you have massive capital reserves, so you can engage in complex derivative hedging to protect against currency fluctuations.
Yeah.
But charities can't usually do that, can they?
Generally, no. They lack those vast, unrestricted capital reserves. And frankly, from a public relations standpoint, if a charity uses donor funds to buy complex currency swaps on the financial markets,
That would look terrible.
the donors might view that as reckless financial speculation rather than famine relief.
Right. So they just have to absorb the hit. A sudden unhedged drop in the value of the British pound or the euro could wipe out millions of dollars of purchasing power on the ground in an emerging market completely outside of their control.
Exactly. Their revenue relies on the goodwill of donors in one part of the world, and their expenses are subject to inflation and severe currency fluctuations in another part of the world.
Wow.
It is an incredibly fragile financial balancing act.
It's like trying to navigate a multinational supply chain, but your revenue depends entirely on people's goodwill, and your workforce is mostly volunteers.
And that fragility is exactly what the examiner wants you to understand.
Right.
In an exam question, you might read a scenario about a multinational charity facing fluctuating exchange rates or struggling to operate in a politically unstable region.
And the question will ask you to identify the primary risks.
Exactly. The examiner is testing to see if you can correctly pinpoint currency risk or country risk as the limiting operational factors, rather than just defaulting to standard commercial risks.
That distinction is crucial. You have to read the scenario through the lens of a not-for-profit's unique constraints. Which actually brings us to the most critical part of this deep dive.
The common mistakes.
Yes. What students get wrong. If there is one thing you remember from our time today, let it be this. What is the single biggest error students make on this topic in the exam room?
The single biggest error, without a doubt, is assuming that charities are completely forbidden from engaging in commercial, profit-making activities.
Yes. I see this logic jump all the time. Students see the words not-for-profit, and their brain automatically translates that to cannot make a profit under any circumstances.
It is a fundamental misunderstanding of the corporate structure.
Yeah.
Let me correct this as clearly and emphatically as possible. Charities can and do run highly profitable businesses.
They really do.
Think about the British Heart Foundation, the British Red Cross, or Age Concern. They operate massive chains of retail shops on high streets across the country. Those shops are commercial, profit-making businesses.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
That just sounds like a massive tax loophole. If charities get tax exemptions, why doesn't every massive corporation just set up a charity, run a profitable retail empire, and dodge corporate taxes? How is that legally allowed?
Because of the rigorous legal ring fencing involved. The critical detail, the exact word that will save your listeners' marks on the exam, is covenant.
Covenant.
Yes. If a company is formed to operate these retail shops, that company must legally and formally covenant its entire annual profits back to the parent charity.
It's blinding.
They make a profit, yes, but they are legally bound to transfer 100% of that profit to the parent charity to fund the philanthropic mission.
So they can't keep a dime.
If they retain even a single dollar to pay out as a dividend to a private shareholder, the structure collapses and they violate their tax exemption.
Okay, let me reiterate this for you, the listener, because this is the exact detail examiners use as a trap in multiple choice questions. They will give you a list of statements about charities and ask which one is true. One of the options will say, charities are strictly forbidden from operating profitable commercial businesses. If you don't know about the covenant structure, you will select that as a true statement and you will lose the mark. Not-for-profit means the profit isn't distributed to private owners. It doesn't mean the profit can't exist.
That's exactly right. If you understand the mechanics of the covenant, you neutralize the examiner's favorite trap instantly.
I love that. So let's take all of this insight and forge it into your exam edge. We want you walking into that exam hall feeling practically bulletproof on this topic. Here are 3 specific, actionable exam technique tips.
Ready when you are.
Number 1, memorize the defining features of a charity. Specifically, look for reliance on unpaid workers and public finance.
That's a huge giveaway.
If an exam scenario describes a not-for-profit organization, but it relies entirely on government grants and paid civil servants, it might be a different type of NFP, like a public sector body or a local authority, but it is not a charity. Look for the volunteers and the public donations as your marker.
Great tip. Tip number 2. When asked about charity performance measures in a scenario, always look for the 3 E's.
Effectiveness, economy, and efficiency.
Yes. If one of the multiple choice options suggests profit maximization or increasing shareholder wealth, cross it out immediately. It is always a distractor in a charity context.
Perfect. And tip number 3. In risk-based questions, actively look for charity fatigue or volunteer shortages as the correct operational risks.
This 3rd tip is vital because it tests your understanding of macroeconomic shifts. Operational risk for charities is uniquely tied to social demographics.
Right.
Many charities rely heavily on unpaid retired people to staff their shops or run their local councils, but there is a massive demographic shift happening globally.
Yeah, populations are aging differently.
Exactly. Future generations of retired people might not be as willing or financially able to work for nothing.
Let's dig into charity fatigue for a second. Are students really losing marks just by missing this? Because it sounds almost more like a sociological concept than a hard business metric.
They absolutely are losing marks on it. It is a heavily tested socioeconomic risk factor, especially during recessions.
Interesting.
When discretionary household income drops due to inflation or a tough economy, public giving is the first thing families cut.
Naturally.
Charity fatigue, which is when the public feels so financially squeezed and so pressured by competing charities that they just stop donating to anyone, is a systemic risk to the entire sector's revenue stream.
So it's very much a business risk.
Oh, absolutely. Examiners want to see that you recognize these unique external vulnerabilities that a standard corporation wouldn't face in the same way.
That makes total sense. If you know these specific traps, the legal ring fencing of the covenant rule, the tension between the three E's, the macroeconomic threat of charity fatigue, and the need for independent guardian trustees, you are stepping into that exam room with insider knowledge that most candidates completely overlook.
You really are. You aren't just memorizing definitions. You actually understand the structural mechanics of how these organizations survive.
And that structural understanding is what allows you to adapt to whatever bizarre scenario the examiner throws at you. You know the rules of their mirror universe now.
Exactly.
We started this deep dive talking about the overwhelm of the ACCA syllabus, the fear of getting tripped up by endless organizational structures and untangling that regulatory spaghetti.
It's a daunting feeling.
It is, but that fear should be gone now. You don't have to be afraid of the charity questions anymore because you now hold the strategic blueprint of exactly how examiners view them. You know how they measure success, how they manage assets, and where their operational risks lie.
If you take away just one thought today, let it be this. A charity isn't just an organization that does good. It's a highly regulated, risk-facing enterprise whose ultimate currency is societal impact.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked a lot about strict state regulators like the Charity Commission controlling what charities can and cannot do based on geography.
Right, local laws.
But think about this. As the world moves rapidly toward decentralized finance and crypto philanthropy, how will regulators enforce strict geographic borders on charities that operate entirely on the blockchain?
Oh, that is a massive question for the future.
It's a fascinating friction point between borderless digital aid and localized regulation that the ACCA syllabus hasn't fully caught up to yet, but it's absolutely the future of this sector. To our global listeners, we want to say a massive, genuine thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
We know what it takes to pursue this qualification. Whether you are waking up 2 hours early to study before work, sacrificing your weekends, or balancing this across different time zones, borders, and life circumstances, your dedication is incredible.
Your commitment to your future is genuinely something to be proud of. Keep going. You have got this.
If you found this breakdown helpful, please follow the show on Spotify and leave us a review. It really helps us keep bringing you these deep dives. Stay curious, stay focused, and keep pushing forward. Thank you for listening.